house, doing whatever I could do to be useful to others, right? And growing up, to be honest with you, I mean, I loved Legos, so like I always thought I could be like some sort of craftsman, right? Like a carpenter or something like that. But I wasn't the best with power tools and wasn't really good at building chairs and stuff like that out of wood. So I was just like, all right, well, I had to think like, well, what other ways can I help people? It's like, I don't really want to study the body. I don't want to be a doctor. I hate reading. So I'm not going to be a lawyer, and I was pretty good with numbers, right? So that was always in the back of my mind. And, my parents always instilled in me to save. So like anytime I had a birthday or a holiday, any type of cash I got, I wouldn't be able to spend it. Like it would go into a savings account, right? And I would just save that money for a later date. And my parents always taught me that, right? So, going into high school, going into college, I started taking a couple finance courses, and I thought it was pretty interesting, right? Learning how to save, what to do, how to invest, what that looks like. And then I saw my parents go through it, right? I mean, I've seen my dad go from, working from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m., driving his one truck to growing a business to where he has, 8 different routes, 9 drivers, 10 trucks, stuff along those lines, right? Where, he really scaled it. And my mom, God bless her soul, she was, an extremely hard worker, right? So, they used to have advisors at, other firms, like I think, like Fidelity and Wells Fargo. I know they have one at Wells Fargo for sure. And, they didn't really know much, right? Because a lot of Americans these days don't really know a lot when it comes to finances. Now, with advancements in social media and all that things, people get the buzzwords of, be your own bank and, investing in crypto and all this kind of stuff. But still, a lot of people don't really know what to do when it comes to investing. So I saw my parents go through that firsthand. And really, the advisor they were working with really wouldn't give them the time of day, right? A lot of advisors in this business really tailor their service towards how much money do you have invested in me, right? And at that time, my parents, just remodeled our house, put an addition on, so, didn't have a ton of assets in the stock market, and really just, had a lot of questions because they didn't know what they were doing, right? Their parents only told them to invest in their 401ks, which, my mom did since my dad owned a business. He really didn't have that option. And so, I kind of saw them go through the trials and tribulations of dealing with a multitude of financial advisors. And it always irritated me, right? That, my parents, they did so well by me. I love them so much. And at the end of the day, they weren't getting what they needed from the people that they were working with. Well, life happens in mysterious ways. And my dad starts coaching with this guy who's now my mentor here at Equitable. He starts coaching with this guy, he's a financial advisor from Northbrook, where I grew up. And, slowly but surely they build a relationship to where he becomes my parents' advisor. And so the way he handled everything was a lot different. He would always, like my parents called him, he would always answer any types of questions they had. He would take longer, in regards to reviews and talking to them about investments just to make sure that they understood what he wanted to do with them and their money. And I really liked that. He even told me to come in and sit on a couple of meetings, right, with my parents so that, I can kind of learn what to do, what not to do, stuff along those lines. So that's really what got me into this business, my fascination of helping others, seeing what my parents went through in regards to dealing with people in my industry, and the fact that, I know a lot of people need help with this. So that's kind of why I kind of chose this path. And then really with Equitable, I really chose them mainly because of my mentor. He kind of took the time to teach me, not only through my parents and meeting with them, but also through an internship opportunity, and stuff along those lines.
Okay, perfect. And then what would you say? I know we talked about this a little bit, the biggest challenges in your first couple of years or your first year, to be more specific, and what sacrifices you made. I know that you said back then there wasn't really a significant pay structure besides commission, so you were kind of working only based on what work you put into the company. Would that be kind of your biggest obstacle and trade off within the first year?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's one of them, but I wouldn't say the biggest. I think the biggest obstacle is obviously finding clients, right?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, the people I wanted to work with were those who already built wealth, right? Those are, those people in their, 40s, 50s, 60s, and early 70s, right? Um, and the biggest thing was, what 65-year-old with millions of dollars invested in the stock market is going to trust a 23-year-old, right? And so that was the biggest problem, right? Especially when talking to people that I knew and had relationships with. It was, how do I get them to not see me as a kid, but see me as a professional and a young adult, right? So I think just understanding not only how to go about marketing myself, but also marketing, how our firm works, and the fact that a lot of senior advisors who have decades of experience are going to be sitting in on me on our meetings, right? Having the conversations with you, answering the questions that I can't answer, so that you can get a better feeling of exactly what to do and how to do it, right? And I think at the end of the day, I think that's the biggest issue in anyone's, not only first year, but first couple of years, right? I mean, it's just, it's finding that, consistency, of doing the things you need to do on a daily basis to get in front of people, but also developing the skills to have the conversations to do that, right? So I would say, obviously the commission was hard. I mean, a lot of sacrifices. I mean, I didn't hang out with a lot of friends. While my friends moved to the city, I lived at home for 2 years, and it was not the most fun, right? Um, my friends would go out every weekend. I would maybe come down to the city once a month, to hang out with them, and I'd be spending most of my time at home, right? So it was pretty lonely those first like 2-3 years. Um, and then also it's just like most of the free time I had was spent on my business, right? Just learning more, trying to educate myself in regards to, investment strategies, what to look at in the markets, stuff along those lines, to where, you know, there was no real work-life balance. It was just work 24/7 unless I'm sleeping or eating. I'm going to the bathroom, to be honest with you. Um, and so that's what you got to be when you're an entrepreneur, right? Like, you can come up with the best idea and you could be extremely knowledgeable on how it works and how it's better than all your competition, and, take the time to research your market and what all that looks like. And the intelligence part is great. But at the end of the day, life rewards action, right? You know, you can come up with the best plan, but if you don't put it into action, all it is, scribble on a piece of paper, right? So, you know, I think that the biggest thing was just, I think that the biggest struggle really outside of finding clients and the pay structure was just one, building those time management skills, and then coming to the realization that, at the end of the day, this is my life. This is not work. It's my life, right? Because, my reputation's on the line, things of that nature. So, there's a lot going on, and yeah, you got to make sacrifices, stay in when you want to go out, or, you know, pinch a penny a couple of weekends so that, when the time comes, you can have a good time. And yeah, so that's I guess what I would say.